What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a simple interview, only to face an onslaught of disrespect that crosses every line? It only took 48 seconds of arrogance for a legendary host to destroy his own reputation on live television. This is the story of the interview that shocked millions. The moment when politeness gave way to fury, and respect turned into a standoff that nobody saw coming. Michael B. Jordan walked into that studio expecting a conversation. What he got instead was something far darker. The lights were bright that evening. The audience was packed, excited, ready for another episode of their favorite late-night show. Jon Stewart sat behind his desk. Papers shuffled in front of him, that familiar smirk playing across his face. And then Michael walked out. The applause was thunderous. People loved Michael. They loved him for his talent, his humility, the way he carried himself with grace in an industry that often demanded otherwise. He waved to the crowd, that genuine smile lighting up his face, and took his seat across from Jon. "Michael B. Jordan, everybody," Jon said, his voice carrying that edge of sarcasm he was known for. "The man who thinks he can act." The audience laughed. They thought it was a joke. Michael laughed too, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of confusion, because that introduction felt off. It felt mean. "Thanks for having me," Michael said, keeping his composure, settling into the chair. "Oh, we had to," Jon replied, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world. "The network insisted, said we needed someone to fill the slot." Another laugh from the audience, but this one was quieter, uncertain. Michael's smile tightened, just a fraction. "Well, I'm glad to be here regardless." "I bet you are," Jon said, shuffling his papers dramatically. "Not a lot of people willing to interview you these days, are there?" The audience went silent. That wasn't a joke. That was an attack. Michael sat up straighter. "I'm sorry. What?" "I mean, let's be honest," Jon continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your last few movies were... what's the word I'm looking for? Forgettable? Generic? Cash grabs?" The air in the studio changed. You could feel it. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to. This was something else. "I think my work speaks for itself," Michael said calmly, but his jaw was tight. "And the audiences seem to disagree with you." "Audiences," Jon scoffed, actually scoffed on camera. "You mean the people who will watch anything with explosions and pretty faces? That's not exactly a high bar, Michael." "That's incredibly disrespectful," Michael said, his voice still controlled, but firmer now. "To me, and to the people who support my work." Jon waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. You're too sensitive. This is what we do. Here, we have fun. We joke around. Can't you take a joke?" "A joke is funny," Michael responded, leaning forward slightly. "What you're doing is just being rude," the audience murmured. Some people started to clap, supporting Michael. But Jon didn't like that. You could see it in his face. His expression darkened. "Rude?" Jon's voice rose. "I'm being rude? You come on my show, sit in my chair, and you have the nerve to lecture me about comedy? About my show?" "I'm not lecturing anyone," Michael said, his hands open, trying to de-escalate. "I'm just asking for basic respect. The same respect I'd show you." "Respect," Jon repeated, like the word tasted bitter. "You want respect? You have to earn respect, Michael. And showing up in franchise movies playing the same character over and over doesn't earn my respect." The audience gasped. Actually gasped, because this had gone too far. Everyone knew it. Michael took a breath, a long, steady breath. He was trying, really trying to keep his cool. "I've worked hard my entire career," he said, his voice measured, but you could hear the emotion underneath. "I've trained, I've studied, I've put everything into my craft, and I don't need to justify that to you or anyone else. Your craft, Jon laughed. Is that what we're calling it now? Listen, I've been doing this for decades. I know talent when I see it. And what I see sitting across from me is someone who got lucky. Someone who happened to have the right look at the right time. Michael's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Jon shot back. I know you're another Hollywood pretty boy who thinks he deserves to be taken seriously. But here's the truth, Michael. You're replaceable. There are 1,000 guys who look just like you, who could do what you do. You're not special. The silence that followed was deafening. The cameras were still rolling. The audience sat frozen. Nobody knew what to do. Michael stood up slowly. He didn't storm off. He didn't yell. He just stood, with a dignity that made Jon look even smaller by comparison. I came here tonight to have a conversation, Michael said, his voice steady despite everything. I came here to talk about my work, to connect with people who might enjoy what I do. But you've made it clear that's not what this is about. Sit down, Jon said, but his voice had lost its edge. He knew he'd messed up. We're not done here. Yes, we are, Michael replied, because I don't have to sit here and be disrespected. Not by you. Not by anyone. Jon stood up too, his face red now. You walk off this set, you'll never work in this town again. Do you understand me? I have power. I have influence. And that's when Michael did something that stunned everyone. He smiled. Not a fake smile, a real one. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Michael said quietly. Power. Control. You can't handle that. Won't just sit here and take your abuse. You can't handle that someone might stand up to you. Get out, Jon said, pointing to the exit. Get out of my studio. I was already leaving, Michael said. He turned to the audience. Thank you all for your support. I'm sorry you had to witness this. The audience erupted in applause. Standing ovation. Every single person in that room stood up for Michael, and Jon just stood there, behind his desk, watching it happen. You're making a mistake, Jon called out, trying to speak over the applause. A huge mistake. Michael stopped at the edge of the stage. He looked back one last time. The only mistake I made was thinking you were better than this, he said. I grew up watching you, respecting you, thinking you stood for something. But tonight, you showed everyone who you really are. And who's that? Jon challenged, his voice bitter. Someone who tears others down to feel important, Michael answered. Someone who forgot that kindness matters more than being right. He walked off stage. The applause followed him all the way. The cameras captured everything. Jon Stewart, standing alone behind his desk, his show falling apart around him, all because he couldn't treat a guest with basic human decency. But let's rewind. Let's look at how this interview actually started. Because the tension didn't begin with those opening insults. It began the moment Michael arrived at the studio. Backstage, before the show, Michael was in his dressing room. He was relaxed, going over some notes, preparing for what he thought would be a friendly conversation. His publicist knocked on the door. They're ready for you in 5, she said. Great, Michael replied, standing up, straightening his jacket. Hey, his publicist added, hesitating. I heard Jon might be in a mood tonight. Just, be prepared. Michael frowned. A mood? What does that mean? She shrugged. Just what I heard from the producers. He's been snippy all day. Had some argument with the network or something. That's not my problem, Michael said. I'm here to do my job. And he was right. It wasn't his problem. Whatever Jon was dealing with, whatever corporate politics were happening behind the scenes, none of that had anything to do with Michael. He was the guest. He deserved to be treated with respect. When Michael walked onto that stage, He had no idea what was waiting for him. The audience loved him immediately. The energy was positive, but Jon's face told a different story. There was something cold there, something hostile. The interview started with those jabs disguised as jokes. But they weren't jokes. They were tests. Jon was testing Michael, seeing how much he could push, how far he could go. "So, Michael," Jon said after the uncomfortable introduction, "tell us about your new movie. Another superhero thing, right?" "It's actually a drama," Michael corrected politely. "About a father reconnecting with his son after years apart." "Riveting," Jon said flatly. "Does he have superpowers in this one, or is he just a regular person?" Michael forced a smile. "Regular person. Just dealing with real human emotions and struggles." "Must be hard for you," Jon quipped. "Playing someone regular." The audience laughed nervously. Michael's smile faded. "Why would that be hard?" he asked. "Well," Jon leaned forward, that fake, thoughtful expression on his face. "You're so used to playing these larger-than-life characters. Do you even know how regular people live? What they go through?" "I grew up regular," Michael said, an edge creeping into his voice. "I know exactly what regular people go through." "Did you, though?" Jon pressed. "Or did you grow up wanting to be famous, chasing that Hollywood dream, disconnected from reality?" "Everyone has dreams," Michael responded. "That doesn't make them disconnected from reality." "But your dreams came true," Jon said. "You got everything you wanted. The fame, the money, the adoration. Must be nice living in that bubble." "It's not a bubble," Michael said firmly. "I work hard. I stay grounded. I remember where I came from." Jon laughed. Actually laughed in his face. "Sure you do. That's why you're wearing a watch that costs more than most people make in a year." Michael looked down at his watch, then back at Jon. "This was a gift from my mother after my first big role. It's sentimental, not a status symbol." "Everything's a status symbol in your world," Jon shot back. "Don't pretend otherwise." The audience was getting uncomfortable. You could see people looking at each other, confused. This wasn't entertainment. This was cruelty. "Why are you doing this?" Michael asked quietly. "What did I do to you?" "You didn't do anything," Jon said with a shrug. "I just think someone needs to keep you humble, keep you grounded in reality." "That's not your job," Michael said. "Your job is to interview me, not attack me." "I'm not attacking you," Jon insisted. "I'm having a conversation, a real conversation. Not some puff piece where I throw you softball questions and you give me rehearsed answers." "There's a difference between a real conversation and being disrespectful," Michael countered. Jon rolled his eyes. "There you go again with the respect thing. You know what? Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you're too soft for real journalism." "This isn't journalism," Michael said, his voice rising slightly. "This is a late-night talk show, and even if it was journalism, journalists have ethics. They have standards." "Don't lecture me about standards," Jon snapped. "I've been doing this since before you could walk." "Then act like it," Michael fired back. The audience actually cheered at that. They were on Michael's side completely, and that made Jon even angrier. "You think you can come on my show and disrespect me?" Jon's voice was loud now, aggressive. "This is my house, my show, my rules." "Your rules include treating guests like garbage?" Michael asked. "Because if that's the case, I want no part of it." "Then leave," Jon said coldly. "Nobody's forcing you to stay." "Maybe I will," Michael said, but he didn't move yet. He was still trying to salvage something, still hoping Jon would realize how far over the line he'd gone. "Before you go," Jon continued, "let me ask you something. Do you ever wonder if you deserve any of this? The success, the opportunities? Or do you just take it all for granted?" Michael stared at him. "That's a horrible question." "It's an honest question," Jon said. Because from where I'm sitting, you've had everything handed to you. The right connections, the right breaks. Meanwhile, there are people out there, real actors, struggling every day, who are 10 times more talented than you'll ever be. You don't know what I've been through, Michael said, his voice shaking slightly with anger. You don't know what I've sacrificed, what I've overcome. Oh, please, Jon waved dismissively. Spare me the sob story. Everyone in Hollywood has a sob story. Everyone had it so hard before they made it. It's all part of the narrative. This isn't a narrative, Michael said. This is my life. Your life, Jon repeated mockingly. Your precious life, where you get paid millions to play pretend. Forgive me if I don't feel sorry for you. That was the moment. That was when something shifted in Michael's eyes. When he realized this wasn't going to get better. That Jon wasn't going to stop. That staying would only mean enduring more abuse. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me, Michael said quietly. I'm asking you to treat me like a human being. And if you can't do that, then we have nothing more to say to each other. Finally, Jon said with a bitter smile. Finally, you show some backbone. This isn't about backbone, Michael said, standing up. This is about self-respect, something you clearly don't understand. Sit down, Jon ordered. We still have 8 minutes left in this segment. Find someone else to fill your time, Michael said. You're really going to do this? Jon asked, disbelief in his voice. You're really going to walk off my show? Watch me, Michael said. And he did. He walked right off that stage while the audience gave him a standing ovation. Jon stood there, speechless for maybe the first time in his career. His producers were scrambling. The cameras didn't know where to focus. It was chaos. But Michael didn't look back. He kept walking, head held high, dignity intact. In the dressing room, his publicist was waiting, phone already ringing off the hook. What happened out there? She asked, eyes wide. He crossed the line, Michael said simply, taking off his microphone. Multiple times, I gave him chances. To correct course, he chose not to. The internet's exploding, she said, looking at her phone. Everyone's on your side. I don't care about sides, Michael said. I just care about being treated with respect. Back on stage, Jon was trying to recover, trying to make jokes, trying to play it off like it was all planned. But the audience wasn't buying it. They'd seen what really happened. They'd watched him bully a guest until that guest had no choice but to leave. Well, Jon said to the cameras, his voice shaky. That was unexpected. Michael B. Jordan, everyone. Or not everyone, I guess, since he's gone. Silence. Dead silence from the audience. Tough crowd tonight, Jon tried again. Let's go to commercial. But the damage was done. In those 48 seconds of initial attacks, in those minutes of escalating hostility, Jon Stewart had shown his true colors, and the world had watched it happen in real time. The thing is, this could have been avoided. All of it. If Jon had just shown up ready to have a normal conversation. If he'd checked his ego at the door. If he'd remembered that his guests are people, not props for his entertainment. Michael came prepared to talk about his work, his passions, his upcoming projects. He came ready to be charming, engaging, thoughtful. Everything a good guest should be. But he was met with hostility from the first moment. Think about those opening words. The man who thinks he can act. What kind of introduction is that? It's designed to demean, to diminish, to make the guest feel small before they even have a chance to speak. And when Michael tried to laugh it off, tried to be gracious, Jon didn't let up. He kept pushing, kept prodding, looking for a reaction. The network insisted, Jon had said we needed someone to fill the slot. Translation: You're not good enough for this show, but I'm stuck with you. How is anyone supposed to respond to that? Michael handled it with grace. He said he was glad to be there regardless. He took the high road. But Jon wouldn't let him stay on that high road. Not a lot of people willing to interview you these days, are there? A complete lie. Michael was one of the most in-demand actors in Hollywood. People were lined up to interview him. But Jon said it anyway, trying to plant seeds of doubt, trying to make Michael feel unwanted. And when Michael defended himself, calmly stated that his work speaks for itself, Jon attacked the audiences who support that work. People who will watch anything with explosions and pretty faces. Insulting not just Michael, but millions of moviegoers. People who genuinely connect with his performances. People who see themselves in his characters. Jon dismissed all of them with one contemptuous sentence. That's when the audience started to turn, because Jon wasn't just attacking Michael anymore. He was attacking them too. Their taste, their intelligence, their right to enjoy. What they enjoy. Michael called it out. That's incredibly disrespectful to me and to the people who support my work. Perfect response. Calm, clear, drawing a boundary. But Jon saw that boundary as a challenge. You're too sensitive. Can't you take a joke? The classic bully's defense. I'm just joking. Why are you so sensitive? It's your fault for being hurt by my cruelty. But Michael didn't fall for it. A joke is funny. What you're doing is just being rude. Simple, direct, true. And that's when Jon really lost it. Because someone was standing up to him. Someone was refusing to play along with his game. His ego couldn't handle it. You come on my show, sit in my chair, and you have the nerve to lecture me about comedy? My show, my chair, my comedy. Everything was about ownership, about control, about Jon's perceived superiority. Michael remained calm. I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm just asking for basic respect. Basic respect. The bare minimum. And Jon couldn't even provide that. Instead, he went lower. Questioned Michael's talent. Called him lucky. Said he was replaceable. There are 1,000 guys who look just like you, who could do what you do. You're not special. Imagine sitting across from someone on national television and having them tell you you're not special, that you're replaceable, that everything you've worked for means nothing. Most people would have exploded, would have yelled, cursed, maybe even gotten physical. But Michael did something far more powerful. He stood up with dignity. He didn't give Jon the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. He didn't play into the narrative of the angry guest. He simply stood, calmly explained why he was leaving, and walked away. But before he left, he made sure to address the audience. Thank you all for your support. I'm sorry you had to witness this. Apologizing to them for Jon's behavior. Taking the high road even in the moment of departure. That's class. That's character. And Jon's response? Threats. You walk off this set, you'll never work in this town again. I have power. I have influence. The desperate words of someone who knows they've lost. Someone trying to regain control through intimidation. But Michael saw right through it. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Power, control. You can't handle that. I won't just sit here and take your abuse. Exactly right. This whole interview was about Jon asserting dominance, proving he could tear someone down whenever he wanted. And when Michael refused to be torn down, Jon couldn't handle it. The final exchange was devastating. Jon, get out of my studio. Michael, I was already leaving. Jon had to have the last word, had to be the one to kick Michael out, even though Michael was already walking away on his own terms. But even that backfired, because Michael made it clear he was leaving by choice, not by force. And then, that final, crushing observation from Michael. The only mistake I made was thinking you were better than this. That had to hurt, because Jon built his career on being the good guy, the one who spoke truth to power, the one who called out hypocrisy and injustice. And here was Michael, calling out Jon's hypocrisy, Jon's injustice. You showed everyone who you really are, Michael said, and he was right. In that interview, Jon revealed himself, not as the witty, insightful host people thought they knew, but as someone petty, cruel, and drunk on his own power. Someone who tears others down to feel important. Someone who forgot that kindness matters more than being right. Those words hung in the air long after Michael left. The audience sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. The producers scrambled to figure out how to salvage the show, and Jon stood alone behind his desk, face red, knowing he'd just made the biggest mistake of his career. All because he couldn't show a guest basic respect. All because his ego was more important than human decency. All because he thought he was untouchable. But Michael B. Jordan proved him wrong. With grace, with dignity, with strength, Michael showed that no amount of power or influence gives someone the right to dehumanize another person. He walked off that stage a winner, not because he got the last word, but because he refused to compromise his values. He refused to sit there and be disrespected just to keep the peace or avoid making waves. That takes courage. Real courage. The kind of courage that comes from knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Jon learned a hard lesson that night, that power without respect is meaningless, that you can have the biggest platform in the world, but if you use it to tear people down, you'll end up standing alone. The audience's standing ovation for Michael said everything. They saw what happened. They saw who was in the wrong. And they voted with their applause, their support, their respect. Michael didn't need Jon's show. He didn't need that platform. He had his talent, his work ethic, his integrity. Those things would carry him far beyond any single interview. But Jon needed that interview to go well. He needed his guests to play along, to laugh at his jokes, to accept his jabs as part of the game. When Michael refused, when he drew a line and said enough, Jon's whole system fell apart. Because the truth is, talk shows are built on mutual respect. The host respects the guest enough to give them a platform. The guest respects the host enough to engage authentically. When one side abandons that respect, the whole thing collapses. Jon abandoned respect first. He came into that interview with an agenda, a chip on his shoulder, a need to prove something, and Michael paid the price, but only temporarily, because in the long run, Michael's grace under pressure, his refusal to sink to Jon's level, his dignity in the face of disrespect, those things elevated him far above. The ugliness of that interview. People would remember this moment. But they wouldn't remember it as the time Michael B. Jordan lost his cool or caused a scene. They'd remember it as the time he stood up for himself. The time he showed that respect isn't negotiable. The time he walked away rather than compromise his values. That's a powerful message, especially in an industry where people are often pressured to just smile and take it, to accept mistreatment as the cost of fame, to let powerful people say whatever they want without consequences. Michael rejected all of that. He said no. He said this isn't okay. He said I deserve better. And in doing so, he gave permission to countless others to do the same, to stand up for themselves, to walk away from toxic situations, to prioritize their dignity over convenience or career advancement. That's heroic. That's what real strength looks like. Not aggression or dominance, but the quiet courage to know when enough is enough. Jon tried to make it about him, about his power, his show, his rules, but Michael made it about something bigger, about basic human decency, about treating people right regardless of who they are or what you think of them. In those 48 seconds of initial attacks, Jon set the tone for his own downfall. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every attempt to belittle Michael just dug the hole deeper, and Michael gave him every opportunity to climb out. He stayed calm, tried to redirect, asked for basic respect. He didn't escalate. He didn't attack back. He just asked to be treated like a human being. When that didn't work, when it became clear Jon had no intention of changing course, Michael made the only choice available to him. He left. Not in anger, not in a rage, but with his head held high and his integrity intact. That's how you win. Not by stooping to someone else's level, but by refusing to let them drag you down. By maintaining your standards, even when others abandon theirs. The standing ovation told Michael everything he needed to know. The people in that room saw what happened. They recognized the injustice, and they chose his side. Not because he was famous or popular, but because he was right. Because respect matters. Because kindness matters. Because how we treat each other, especially in moments of conflict, defines who we are. Jon failed that test. Michael passed it with flying colors. And that's the real story here. Not just about a failed interview or a dramatic walkout, but about character, about values, about what happens when someone refuses to be diminished by another person's cruelty. Michael B. Jordan walked into that studio as a respected actor. He walked out as something more, as someone who proved that dignity can't be taken, only given away. And he refused to give his away. No matter what Jon said or did or threatened, he couldn't take that from Michael. Couldn't break him or make him small or diminish his worth. Because Michael knew his worth, and that knowledge, that certainty, was armor against every insult Jon could throw. In the end, Jon stood alone behind his desk, his show in shambles, his reputation in tatters, and Michael walked out to thunderous applause, his dignity intact, his character proven. That's the power of staying true to yourself. That's the power of refusing to compromise your values for anyone or anything. Jon thought he had all the power in that room, the platform, the audience, the home field advantage. But real power doesn't come from a desk or a title or a television show. It comes from within, from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone change that, from standing firm in your values, even when it costs you something. Michael demonstrated that power. He showed everyone watching that you don't have to accept mistreatment, that you can walk away, that your self-respect is worth more than any interview or opportunity. And in doing so, he became the hero of his own story. Not by defeating Jon in some grand confrontation, but by simply refusing to participate in his own degradation. That's a lesson worth remembering. In work, in relationships, in life, you teach people how to treat you, and sometimes teaching them means walking away from those who refuse to learn. Michael taught that lesson perfectly, with grace, with strength, with unwavering commitment to his own dignity. Jon learned it the hard way, in front of millions, with no one to blame but himself. 48 seconds. That's all it took to set this whole chain of events in motion. 48 seconds of ego and arrogance and disrespect. But those 48 seconds revealed everything about who Jon really was beneath the charm and the jokes, about who Michael was when tested and pushed and attacked. The truth always comes out eventually. And that night, in that studio, the truth was undeniable. One man forgot what it means to treat people with respect. Another man showed the world what it means to demand it. And we all learned something important. That how we respond to mistreatment matters. That walking away isn't weakness, but strength. That dignity is non-negotiable. Michael B. Jordan taught us that. Not through a speech or a lecture, but through his actions. Through his calm in the face of hostility. Through his grace under pressure. Through his refusal to let someone else's ugliness corrupt his own character. That's the real story. That's what people will remember long after the shock of the walkout fades. Not just that an interview went wrong, but that someone showed us how to handle it right. How to maintain your integrity, even when everything around you is falling apart. how to know when to stay and when to go, how to treat yourself with the respect you deserve, even when others won't. Thank you, Michael, for the example, for the lesson, for showing us what real strength looks like. And Jon? Well, he learned too, just not the lesson he expected. He learned that power without respect is empty, that you can't bully people into submission forever, that eventually someone will stand up and say, no more. Michael was that someone, and we're all better for having witnessed it.